Welcome back. This one begins with a piece of paper that should never have been there. At Mercer House, amid lilies, black suits, and careful grief, Evelyn Shaw opened condolence book and found blue envelope tucked behind last page. Her name sat on front in Eleanor Shaw's slanted handwriting. Below it, not for Daniel. Not for Marion. For the one they call weak. Evelyn's fingers tightened. The wax seal carried tiny lily stamp. Not family seal. Not lawyer seal. Personal. Her throat went dry. Across room, Marion Bell, longtime housekeeper, stood by silver coffee urn with face blank as church stone. She had not looked surprised. She had looked ready. Daniel Shaw, still in funeral black, reached for envelope with hand that shook too fast. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had buried his mother 3 hours ago, and already grief had sharp edges. "Give it here," he said, hoarse. "No. It has my name." Paper slid free. One line, bold and cruel, second will and final instruction. Evelyn stared. Then came second line. Estate to Marion Bell, sole heir, including Mercer House. The room did not explode. It froze. That was worse. Forks hung in air. Someone near dessert table whispered, "No." Evelyn looked up. Marion had closed her eyes, not in triumph, but in grief so deep it almost looked like prayer. And that was the first thing that made the hair rise on Evelyn's neck. Eleanor had planned this. Whatever came next, she wanted a witness. Eleanor Shaw had ruled Mercer House for 30 years. She ruled from a wheelchair in her last months, but power had not moved an inch. Her children still straightened when her name was spoken. Her staff still waited for her nod. Even dead, she had arranged this room like theater. Black napkins. White roses. Family portraits on easels. One giant photo of Eleanor over fireplace, eyes sharp as nails. Evelyn stood near sideboard, one hand flat on her purse, the other gripping second will so hard her knuckles burned. She had spent 8 years in this family and still felt like guest who had overstayed. That was Eleanor's favorite way to make her feel small. A wrong joke at dinner. A pause too long when Evelyn spoke. A look across table that said, "You are temporary." Marion approached with tray of untouched sandwiches. She was plain, steady, ironed into herself. No jewelry except silver watch. No tears now, only the kind of composure that comes from years of being useful and invisible. The family called her staff. Eleanor called her Margaret once, in public, when she wanted to humiliate her. Marion never corrected her. "I did not mean for you to find that here," Marion said softly. "You knew about it," Evelyn said, tight. "Eleanor made me promise nothing would come before reception." Daniel came back from hallway with red eyes and a harder face. His sister, Claire, followed close behind, already angry in a controlled way that meant she had chosen a target. Claire had managed family money for 5 years. She dressed like a board meeting and spoke like a verdict. "Hand me that envelope," Claire said sharply. "This is manipulation." Evelyn almost laughed from shock. Manipulation. At a funeral. In a room built from grief and money. Claire's gaze flicked to Marion, then to Evelyn, then to guests who were pretending not to watch. The optics mattered more than truth. Everyone in room knew it. The old housekeeper had cleaned up after birthdays, divorces, and hospital calls. But the family still used her like wallpaper. Now her name sat in center of a legal bomb. Evelyn saw it clearly then, whoever controlled story controlled Mercer House. And right now, no one controlled anything. Daniel whispered, "Not here. We deal with this later." But Marion's eyes lifted once, straight to Evelyn. There was warning in them. Not fear. Warning. As if Eleanor had already said what had to be said, and everyone in room was late to their own ruin. Evelyn slipped away before she could be cornered by Claire or swallowed by room. She went where air changed. Past framed oil portraits. Past closed library door. Eleanor never allowed anyone to enter alone. Her pulse beat in her ears. The wool felt warm in her hand, as if it had just been held. On a narrow table outside library sat Eleanor's medication tray and a small notebook with velvet ribbon. Beneath notebook, another object waited. A hospice receipt. Paid in cash. Initialed by Marion Bell. Evelyn frowned and lifted it. One item line stood out. Private notarization. 3 days before death. That mattered. First will had been signed 5 years ago, according to Daniel's comments at dinners and Claire's proud little speeches about continuity. But this receipt suggested later legal work. Someone had brought a notary into house. Someone had kept it quiet. Behind her, library door opened a crack. Light spilled out. Marion stood there, tired now, no longer ironed into composure. Her hands trembled once before she folded them. Eleanor changed everything after hospital stay, Marion said low. She said family would circle if they smelled weakness. Why tell me? Why not Daniel? Evelyn asked carefully. Because Daniel still thinks love and inheritance can live in same room. That line landed hard. Not cruel. Honest. Marion stepped aside and let Evelyn see inside library. Desk lamp on. Closed ledgers. One stack of envelopes tied with black ribbon. A banker's box marked POA. Power of attorney. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Marion saw it and did not flinch. They used Eleanor's signature more than once after she got weak, Marion said quietly. Not all of it was legal. Not all of it was hers. The words spread cold through Evelyn's chest. She heard, in one instant, every polished family line that had ever made her feel dim and fragile. Eleanor had known. Marion had known. And somebody in house had been moving money while everyone performed grief in public. Claire's heels cut toward corridor like a metronome. She was already hunting. And Evelyn understood something ugly. If she stayed passive, they would decide she was unstable. If she spoke too early, they would say grief had made her cruel. There was no clean move left. Only one that cost her something. Claire gathered the family with precision. She did not raise her voice. She did worse. She smiled. At Mercer House, that meant someone was about to bleed socially. Guests were still there. Cousins. Trustees. A lawyer from town. 2 neighbors who had come for casseroles and stayed for gossip. Claire stood behind Eleanor's chair at head of table, hand resting on carved wood like she already owned it. Daniel sat rigid. Evelyn sat near sideboard because no one had offered her a real place. Marion remained by serving doors, invisible on purpose and yet somehow more central than anyone else. Before this goes any further, we should acknowledge that only one document was read at service, Claire said clearly. The one our mother filed years ago. Not some surprise tucked into condolence book. A few heads turned. One guest lifted brows. Claire had done her work. She had turned grief into suspicion and made it sound like prudence. My brother is not signing anything tonight, she said. No one is selling anything. No one is taking advantage while family is emotional. Then she looked at Evelyn. Slowly. Like a blade being shown. And if certain people here think marriage gives them a claim to Mercer House, they should know better. We have been patient with instability before. We will not reward it now. Evelyn felt room tip. Instability. It was old language. The kind used on women who cried at dinner, asked wrong questions, or reacted when cornered. She had heard it from Eleanor more than once, disguised as concern. Now Claire used it in public, with an audience. Daniel's jaw flexed. He did not stop her. That hurt more than the insult. Marion set down a bowl of potatoes with deliberate care. The sound was tiny. It seemed to travel through whole room. You mean the will you wanted, Evelyn said quietly. I mean the real one, Claire said sweetly. Evelyn stood. Not quickly. Carefully. Her hands were shaking, but her voice came out flat enough to sting. Then explain this receipt. And explain why Eleanor paid for a private notarization 3 days before she died. Claire stared at it. For 1 second, only one, something raw crossed her face. Not surprise. Recognition. Then she recovered. Where did you get that? There it was. Not denial. Fear. Daniel looked down at paper and then at Marion. Marion did not move. The room had shifted. Some guests now watched Claire. Others watched Marion. Nobody watched Evelyn the same way anymore. She had moved from ornament to threat. Claire's composure cracked just enough to reveal what she feared most, not loss of money. Loss of control. If there had been a later document, she had not seen it. Or had seen it and hidden panic behind polished grief. Either way, she was no longer in command. Marion finally spoke, voice level as stone. Eleanor said if they made a scene, I should let them. Silence. That silence humiliated everyone. It said Eleanor expected this. It said Eleanor planned every face and room. And it left Claire standing in front of guests with no weapon except volume, which now looked cheap. After guests had gone, after gossip had eaten dessert and left crumbs of outrage, Marion locked library door and put a small cassette recorder on desk. It looked old enough to belong to another decade. That was part of what made it terrifying. Eleanor had loved paper, tape, and proof that could survive a fight. Daniel stood near bookshelf with face pale and stubborn. Claire remained upright in an expensive black coat, arms folded so tight her hands disappeared. Evelyn sat in chair nearest desk because Marion pointed and said, "Stay there. You need to hear this clean." Eleanor's voice came first. Thin, dry, unmistakable. No room for argument. If this is playing, then somebody thought they could bury truth with me. They were wrong. Evelyn stared at Marion. Marion kept eyes on desk. First will was written for peace. Second will is written for test. My children think Mercer House is reward for blood. They have forgotten who stayed when I could not stand. Who held bowl when I vomited. Who slept in chair by door when family went home to proper beds. Claire's mouth tightened. Daniel looked sick. Marion Bell shall inherit house, contents, and all property in her name because she earned my trust. She did not ask for it. She did not scheme for it. That is why she deserves it more than any of you. Then tape clicked. Another voice. A notary, calm and formal, saying date and time, saying Eleanor was of sound mind, saying witnesses were present. Marion had tears on her lower lashes now, but she still did not move. The room had no defense left. Then came final segment. Eleanor again. There is one more thing. Power of attorney was used on my accounts without consent. I asked for copies. They were denied. If my family hears this before they see records, they will lie. So let this tape travel first. Marion has envelope in blue safe. Give it to Evelyn if my children turn vicious. Evelyn will know what to do. She is not weak. She is merely outnumbered. Evelyn felt heat climb her face. Outnumbered. Eleanor had seen her exactly. Not fragile. Not weak. Cornered. That was not comfort. It was a command. Daniel's breath broke. Mom. Claire lunged for recorder. Marion caught her wrist. Not hard. Enough. The movement was small, but in tight room it sounded like a judge's gavel. Claire stared at Marion like she had never seen her at all. No more touching what is not yours, Marion said low. Evelyn looked from tape to faces and saw whole trap snap into place. Eleanor did not merely leave a will. She left an accusation. A second will. A witness. A paper trail. And a motive so poisonous it turned inheritance into evidence. The blue safe was behind law books and old tax binders. Marian opened it with a key wrapped inside prayer card. Inside weighted bank folders, a spare deed copy, and one slim envelope marked for Evelyn only. Claire had gone to pace in hallway. Daniel sat on floor like someone had pulled chair from under him. Evelyn took envelope with both hands. Inside were copies. Bank statements. POA forms. Hospice notes. One note in Eleanor's hand, check who signed withdrawals. Check who signed repair bills. Check who took control when I could not speak. Then Evelyn saw signature. Claire's initials on account access. Daniel's on one property notice. Not forged. Signed under family emergency language. A signature can be a confession when it is lazy enough. Evelyn looked up slowly. Claire was at doorway now, face tight, trying to stay above panic. You knew, Evelyn said quietly. I was managing bills, Claire said. Mother trusted me. That was the problem. It sounded true enough to survive in a better room. Claire had handled records when Eleanor weakened. She had told herself it was duty. Maybe even mercy. But records showed she had frozen Marian out, cut checks, and moved paper through a private account. It was not cartoon evil. It was a woman who had started by protecting family and ended by protecting control. Do you know what it costs to keep this place standing? To keep her alive? To keep Daniel from gambling at bad moments and you from wandering in with your opinions? Claire snapped. There. The honest motive. Fear of collapse. Fear that without her, everything would rot. That did not save her. It only made her human enough to hate correctly. Daniel lifted head. Rage and shame mixed in his face. You stole from Mom? I kept house from falling apart. Claire shouted. Marian stepped forward for first time with purpose. She laid another paper on desk. Notary ledger. Her finger rested on date and time. Then on line below. Witness signature. Daughter by marriage, Evelyn Shaw. Evelyn went still. Her own name on witness line. She had been called into Eleanor's room months ago, told to read a magazine, told not to ask why attorney was there. Eleanor had used her as witness. Not because she trusted her with money. Because she trusted her with memory. That changed everything. Evelyn understood at once. Eleanor had seen how the family dismissed her. So she made Evelyn part of proof. A weak woman was useful because no one listened to her. That blindness became the blade. She stood. Slowly. Calmly. Her voice, when it came, had no tremor now. You wanted me small. That was your mistake. Claire blinked. For first time, she looked unsure. Not because Evelyn was louder. Because Evelyn was finally done asking permission. Evelyn placed blue envelope on desk beside tape recorder and said, very clearly, call probate attorney. Call bank. If you do not, I will. And I will take every copy of this outside tonight. Nobody moved. Then Daniel reached for phone. Not because he was brave. Because he had no clean choice left. The house changed around that motion. The weak one had detonated room, and now everyone had to live in blast radius. The probate attorney answered after 2 rings. Then the bank. Then hospice administrator. 1 call became 3. 1 room became record. Claire sat in chair opposite desk, shoulders rigid. Daniel paced. Marian stood by window, hands folded now that evidence had found its place. Evelyn stayed upright because if she sat, she might feel how much it cost to stand this long. If that tape and ledger are authentic, the second will supersede prior instructions, the attorney said. We can file tomorrow morning. Lock down accounts tonight. Claire closed her eyes. Not in defeat. In calculation. Evelyn saw it and felt no mercy. The woman had made her own choices. But she had also been carrying whole house on her back until it bent her ethics crooked. That was the ugly truth family stories always tried to hide. The bank officer confirmed temporary freeze on contested transfers. Hospice verified notary visit. The administrator remembered Eleanor insisting Marion stay in room while family left. Every detail matched. The chain was too clean to fight. Too many eyes. Too many signatures. Too many ordinary facts that turned into a blade when lined up. Daniel stopped pacing. "What happens to us?" he asked, broken. No one answered right away. That silence was the answer. Mercer House did not belong to them anymore, at least not in old sense. Pride had already been cut loose. Reputation was following. The family would have to explain itself to lawyers, trustees, and every relative who had watched funeral reception turn into courtroom. Marion finally spoke. "I move in tomorrow. I keep house. I keep records. And I pay every contractor Mother told me not to trust." Claire laughed once, tiny and wrecked. It was not joy. It was shock giving up. She planned every inch of it. Claire whispered. "Yes. She did," Marion said. Then Marion looked at Evelyn. The room changed again. Not because of money. Because of recognition. A woman who had been treated like furniture had become the only steady thing in room. Eleanor had made that happen with cruel precision. Marion pushed another envelope across desk. Inside was a deed amendment. Not full ownership. Not inheritance. Use rights to guest wing and a recorded stipend for maintenance if Evelyn stayed married to Daniel, or if she left with no interference. A strange mercy. Eleanor had built one door open and another locked. That was her style. Evelyn stared. This was where the moral argument lived. She could burn house down by publishing every file and call it justice. Or she could keep some private, protect Marion from more public pain, and let some humiliation die in room. She chose the second. Not because family deserved softness. Because Marion did. File the will. Freeze the accounts. Leave the rest out of the papers, Evelyn said steady. 3 quiet breaths answered her. Daniel looked at her like he did not know whether to thank her or fear her. Claire looked at her like she had just lost fight and respect at once. Marion closed her eyes, once, in relief. Evelyn had not saved the family. She had chosen what kind of ruin it would become. That was power. By dawn, Mercer House looked smaller. Not poorer. Smaller. Power had left by inches. The lawyers had paperwork. The bank had freezes. The cousins had already begun calling each other with sharpened voices and fake concern. Eleanor's portrait still hung over fireplace, but now it looked less like a monument and more like a warning. Marion moved through kitchen with sleeves rolled and face empty. She had inherited a house, yes. But also scrutiny, resentment, and a family that would never forgive her for being chosen. That was its own sentence. Daniel sat at table with cold coffee, staring at legal copies like they might turn into his mother if he watched long enough. Claire had not slept. She had gone upstairs to pack, then stopped, then started again. That kind of ruin took time. Evelyn stood at back window and watched wet lawn turn silver. She had paid too. Her marriage was now a question mark. Daniel would never again look at his sister, his mother, or his own silence the same way. Evelyn had kept one truth private, and that meant she carried its weight alone. On the deed amendment, one line had bothered her from the first read: if Evelyn ever learns why Eleanor really chose her, she must ask Marion. She turned. Marion set down cup, then a small key beside it. Same key shape as safe. Different cut. Older. She left one thing out of tape, Marion said tiredly. Evelyn felt cold move through her. Not now. Not before lawyers. But soon. And when you hear it, you may hate her more. Or pity her. I still cannot tell which. That was the sting. Eleanor's trap had not ended with money. It had ended with one more hidden motive, one more secret thread waiting under floorboards. Even after all that truth, house still had one locked room. Evelyn closed fingers around key and understood, winning against dead matriarch meant living with her puzzle. Outside, dawn brightened on wet grass. Inside, nobody celebrated. That was how a family paid for truth. Some lost home. Some lost name. Some lost the right to pretend they had ever been innocent. And one woman, dismissed as weak, stood at center of wreckage with key in hand and eyes open. So there you have it. A funeral, a second will, and one dead woman who turned grief into a trap. If you want more stories where the polite ones hide the sharpest knives, stay close. There is always another secret waiting in the quiet.